In addition to reviewing trials for safety and data quality, DSMBs are often looked to for recommendations on stopping trials early. So what are the three main areas for review for the DSMB? When can a trial be stopped? What are the reasons for stopping a trial? And who actually makes that decision? As we've seen, the main focus areas for DSMBs are safety, validity, and scientific merit. Safety and validity have some relatively clear-cut definitions and places to look to, such as adverse events, side effects, serious adverse events. The data quality, what is missing, is it reliable, reproducible, and internal and external validity. The scientific merit is where the expertise of the DSMB comes into play. Is there a sound rationale? Are we minimizing risks and maximizing benefit? Are there clear objectives and measurable outcomes? And if those things are lacking, if there's a big safety risk that's not outweighed by the benefit, if the data is of poor quality or the trial has operational issues, or if there's no longer scientific merit for the study, the DSMB may recommend that the trial be stopped. In addition to that, the charter will make clear for the DSMB what types of continuation, modification, or termination of the trial can occur. So following every DSMB meeting, they generally make a recommendation for continuation. The hope is that there's very little of excitement in your trial in terms of extreme safety issues, issues with data validity, or that the landscape of the disease has not changed significantly to render your trial moot. So mostly you hope for continuation. Sometimes there will be modification. So if the trial is continuing, are there any recommended changes towards safety, efficacy, data collection, or operations? For example, has long-term use of the drug now shown that you need to screen people for cardiac issues? Do you need to monitor them now for GI-related issues? Or are there mental health issues associated in the disease that have changed such that you need to modify inclusion and exclusion criteria or implement additional safety monitoring procedures? The reasons for termination generally fall into study superiority or futility, safety reasons, and then operational reasons, ethical reasons, or reasons for the intervention, such as the intervention is no longer going to be made available, or the company is sold and the new company no longer wants to produce it, and therefore the trial would have to stop. Superiority is what we generally think of as the goal in a clinical trial. We're looking to show that one intervention is superior to another. Superiority statistically means that regardless of the remainder of the data being collected, the new treatment will result in more benefit. So if you've collected 70% of your data, the effect size is so large such that if the remainder 30% of the data found for the null hypothesis, you would still ultimately have statistical significance towards the alternative. The pros, of course, for superiority is that you can have faster approval or implementation of the best therapy or winner. It's cheaper because there will be no more financial output beyond closing the trial out. And it limits the participants being exposed to a clearly inferior intervention. The cons here, of course, are reduced precision, so you will not have a full sample size or a larger sample size to increase precision. There could be lack of power for other variables or endpoints. So if your secondary endpoints are of critical importance, then you may no longer have power to assess those hypotheses. You could see an inflated treatment effect, such that the effect is so large you are able to declare superiority now, and you cease collecting data, and if there's a difference in cohorts, the treatment effect may be due to that. As you tend to enroll incident cases of disease later in a study, the treatment effect may be dampened, and you wouldn't see that. You will also definitely miss longer safety profile or risks. The opposite to superiority is futility. So the flip side is say you've collected 70% of your data, and it turns out even if the remainder of 30% of your data found for the alternative, you would still declare equivocal and find for the null. So you need to be very mindful of this in the reverse reasons. The pros here, that you limit participants exposed to an inferior treatment. It does not result in loss of future benefit, and there is, of course, a cost savings because the trial will finish now rather than expending additional resources to continue to find for the null hypothesis. The cons here, again, reduced precision. You will also miss longer-term safety profile or risks. Potential imbalance in covariates here. Unlikely intervention will be pursued in the future. So stopping for futility often means that intervention is no longer going to be pursued by anyone. One of the most common reasons that studies are stopped early, there's an increased risk that does not outweigh the benefits in any one or more of the interventions. It is also possible, by the way, in a multi-arm study to stop one arm of the trial. So if you have 3 or 4 arms that have interventions and one arm is found to be unsafe, you may be able to just stop that single arm. There are study data reasons, so new groups carries too high risks, deaths, SAEs, etc., or the placebo group is having safety issues and you can no longer warrant keeping people on a placebo treatment arm. This isn't always about parity, meaning equality in the groups. Both arms could be deemed unsafe at the same time. So there could be different reasons. So it turns out that you could have something that is showing superiority, but the safety profile is so bad that it doesn't warrant continuing the new treatment arm. There are external reasons to stop. So new information comes to light regarding safety of an intervention, either from other studies that are ongoing, from the company, from the FDA, or from the media. So external reasons, and this is where your DSMB and you paying attention to what's going on in your field at the time of your trial can be very helpful and help you get ahead of some of these things and be prepared for what may come and impact your specific study. There are ethical issues to stop trials, so they're not related to the study results or outcomes. This can happen. None of them are good. Data fraud is an example, so falsifying records, making up data. If you uncover fraud at one particular center, you may be able to remedy that and close that center down and then do re-education at the rest of your centers. This is where data monitoring is so essential. There can be personnel issues at specific sites, loss of licensure, certifications, training. If those personnel issues occur in the primary investigator of the study, then of course that could have a bigger impact. There could be informed consent issues. Participants are being misled or not being consented with respect to accepted guidelines. Again, single center issues can be dealt with. If it's a small study and this is occurring at your main center, you'll have a problem. Clinical site issues, so the protocol is difficult to follow or it's not being implemented correctly. There are issues with randomization, or the study is unblinded intentionally, either across the board or at specific sites. Those will all have to be discussed and presented to the DSMB for a decision. Intervention issues are hopefully less frequent, but the companies providing drugs may stop doing that, or they may charge too much and make it untenable to continue paying for the medications or the device. An intervention is removed from the market, therefore you can no longer offer it, so the study would have to cease at that point. Or there's a change to the formulation of drug, so it may make it impossible or difficult for participants to get it within the confines of the study. Changes to the route of administration, that would break your blind, or it goes from being offered daily to 3 times a week. Operational issues can cause a study to shut down. Sites stop participating. Protocols too arduous on the participants. So not that it's a protocol issue with the site, but it's a protocol issue with participants. There's high dropout or low recruitment. That often comes from competing issues if new medications have been made available during your trial. Fiscal issues, so funding is withdrawn or runs out. The sponsor decides that there is no cost benefit, which is really unfortunate, particularly if you're showing an efficacious intervention. So who will make this decision? This decision to stop can come from the sponsor, the study personnel, IRBs or institutions, or the DSMB. Almost always the DSMB will weigh in on the decision, unless of course it is strictly that there is no longer any more financial viability or the sponsor has pulled support. So how frequently does this happen? There was a recent 2015 paper published that looked at all of the terminated clinical trials on clinicaltrials.gov through 2013 of February. The main outcomes were to characterize the availability of primary outcome data on that site and identify the reasons for trial termination. So this, of course, will be for trials that were posted on clinicaltrials.gov. So it does include contemporary trials and not older trials necessarily. So quoting from the paper, approximately 12% of trials with results posted on clinicaltrials.gov, that's 905 out of 7,646 were terminated. So we were looking at a 12% early termination rate. The reasons for termination were broken down such that scientific data from the trial, so that would be superiority or futility, that accounted for 20% of the studies being terminated early. Other than that, the other reasons, the largest reason for termination was insufficient accrual rate. So the trial was not recruiting. You would have to go and look at competing reasons for that. Was it because there was competing medication intervention in the market? Or was it poor study design? Was the trial too arduous? So you could see also then about 13 or 12% unspecified business or strategic reason. That would be that the trial is too expensive or the sponsor pulled the funding. Just shy of 10% was trial administration, so issues with the protocol or the investigators or the sites. And then another 10%, the termination reasons were not provided. When there is sufficient evidence to stop a study, this can be, of course, a squishy benchmark. Fraud, serious safety issues, operational. Otherwise, you should have every effort made to continue data collection or see an interim analysis before that decision is made to stop early. You can have an interim analysis called for when it was not planned to assess if continuing recruitment is going to be useful. You can look at an interim analysis for futility or superiority as well in an unplanned manner. Remember, no statistical method is a singular substitute for robust judgment given context. So even if a trial is shown to be superior, it may continue on to provide additional benefit. You can switch all participants to an active arm. You may be looking for a longer safety profile. You may be looking at whether or not it is feasible to maintain patients on a treatment for that long. You might be looking to see if you can find a more precise estimate or judge secondary endpoints. So trial termination early should be entirely contextual. What's going on in the field, what's going on in your trial, and what does the landscape look like moving forward?